So I'm going to go straight and ask Marco to take the podium and make his presentation.
Yeah, hello everybody. Is this working? Oh yeah, okay, everybody can hear me, great. Yeah, I'm Marco Springman and I will be talking about the cost and affordability of healthy diets. So the background to it is that the food system in general is facing increasing environmental and health challenges. We recently estimated that without dedicated measures, in particular dietary changes towards more nutritionally sensitive plant-based, predominantly plant-based diets, it's very likely that environmental impacts will increase to such an extent that it might exceed key planetary boundaries on climate change, land use, water use, and fertilizer application. At the same time, we also know that poor diets are responsible for most attributable risk globally and in most regions, and indeed more so than any other behavioral risk factor. I guess with lots of reports having come out recently, there is now an increasing recognition that dietary changes towards more healthy and sustainable diets are really paramount going forward, and not only a health and environmental challenge, but also a social challenge. Surprisingly, maybe not so much is known about the economic dimensions of such changes to healthy and sustainable diets. And in this panel, we will hear a little bit more about those, not only from my talk, but also from others on the panel. In terms of global reviews about the affordability and cost of diets, they're really far and few between. There was one meta-analysis that looked mainly at high-income countries and found that healthier dietary patterns are often more expensive than less healthy ones, but it was really hard to standardize those different diets. And on the other hand, we have another body of literature that uses optimization techniques to construct healthier and sometimes more sustainable diets, and showed that those could in general be obtained without increased cost in the countries that they were studied. But again, those were mostly from high-income countries like the UK, New Zealand, and France. So not only are they difficult to generalize because they're mostly from those high-impact countries, but they are not comparable across regions, and usually they didn't use any consistent method of collecting and using price data. So in this study, we tried to remedy some of those things and provide regionally comparable estimates of diet cost for a standardized set of healthy and sustainable diets. What kind of diets did we adopt? Well, our starting point was the Eat Lancet report, for which we had constructed what is sometimes called a planetary health diet, but it's really very general dietary guidelines that are broadly in line with what others might call a flexitarian diet. So that means not more than 1 serving of red meat per week, not more than 2 servings of poultry per week, not more than 2 servings of fish per week, and two days a week vegetarian or vegan. So that's the flexitarian diet, which is the base. Based on that, we constructed also more specialized diets like pescatarian, vegetarian, and vegan diets. And in each of those cases, we regionalized them based on the preference for example, for grains or for different types of fruits and vegetables in each country. We made them calorie balanced, and we analyzed that nutritional needs are satisfied in those different diets. Because we're looking here at the cost of diets, we also differentiated between high veg and high grain varieties, specifically for the more specialized diets. The way the pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan diets were constructed was by taking the animal portion of the flexitarian diet and replacing it with whatever defines those more specialized diets. However, as a result, most of those diets are much higher in fruits and vegetables, something that is echoed in observational studies. But maybe for affordability reasons, since fruits and vegetables are usually very pricey, you might want to think of instead increasing the whole grain portion. That doesn't mean that those high grain diets have low fruits and vegetables. They still have more than 500 grams in each case, but the balance is a bit shifted. Then coming to prices, it's really hard to find an open, standardized set of prices for each country. because there is not such a set, we used a global food systems model to estimate wholesale prices in each country. And that was based on market prices, consumer support measures, and tariff structures. And we simulated those wholesale commodity prices in each country for 2010, 2030, and 2050 to look also into the future along a business as usual development pathway. Because those are wholesale prices, that means that they don't include markup at processing and retail levels. So that means they're indicative of really the theoretical basic cost of diets, which is obviously a caveat. On the other hand, it's not confounded by choice of retailer. For example, what we see in high-income countries often is that when people decide to consume a healthier diet, suddenly they change from shopping at a discount supermarket at a high-class supermarket like Whole Foods or Waitrose. So we don't have that problem here. So let's jump right into the results. What you see here is are the price data. Interestingly, maybe something you would expect, plant-based products are much cheaper than animal-based products. There is a difference of up to a factor of 10. Most expensive are beef and lamb, and staple crops are the cheapest. For many commodities, prices in low-income countries are actually higher than in high-income countries. The price difference for vegetables is, for example, 44%, it's 20% for meat, and that has to do with how inefficiencies in the market, basically. The only differences are really sugar and ground nuts and some other commodities that are produced in the country. This is the central results slide, and it's probably a bit hard to see, so you just have to listen to me instead of looking at it, or going to the side screens. So first, the global results, right? There we see that maybe surprisingly, all of the healthy and sustainable diets we analyzed are globally cheaper than the benchmark diets. However, that difference hides, that general trend hides large differences across the regions. So what you see in the other panels is that the results for high-income countries, upper middle-income countries, lower middle-income countries, and low-income countries. And what you see there, first of all, is that high-income countries consume 3 to 6 times more meat and milk per person and have, as a result, 90% higher food expenditure. So it is, if you compare this one here with this one, all right? What you also see is that you have large savings in the sustainable and healthy diet patterns in high-income and also in middle-income countries. Thank you. Does that work? Oh yeah, it actually does work. So the savings can be really quite dramatic. So the greatest savings are for high-grain vegan diets in high-income countries. They are 48% in that case. And they're lowest amongst the countries where you have savings for high-veg pescatarian diets in lower middle-income countries. That would be here. What you see in low-income countries is, however, a totally different story. So there you have comparably less animal products that normally would be very expensive, and where you would get a saving, basically, if you transition to more plant-based diets. But because you don't have so much, and you really need to ramp up the consumption of fruits and vegetables in many of those low-income countries to have a balanced diet, the expenditure on those diets usually is larger than the benchmark cost in the year 2030. If you look at it at a regional level, you see that most of those countries that show increased costs are in sub-Saharan Africa, but India would be another one, whereas in Europe, North America, and most places in Latin America see large savings. If you compare increased costs to savings, you see that the savings outweigh the costs globally. So you have savings for up to 119 countries versus increases in up to 68 countries. And if you measure what the expenditure would be, okay, the savings and expenditure would range to up to 1.5 trillion for the most beneficial high-grain vegan diet. this is, yeah, I can make that the last slide in the interest of time. Sensitivity analysis, where we looked at different price trajectories. We looked at if you include waste or not, if you balance calories, and what year you look at. The interesting thing is, if you look closer to now, basically in 2010, you have a greater set of diets that are more expensive globally than the benchmark diets. And if you look more into the future, as more efficiency measures are implemented across a development pathway, you have greater savings compared to the benchmark diets. And in the year 2050, you even find savings in low-income diets for vegetarian and vegan diets. So if you phrase it as a sort of development alternative, either you go down a westernization of diet in low-income countries versus one where you go to healthy and sustainable diets by the year 2050, then the latter one would be beneficial. And as I showed you, it would be beneficial also in high and middle-income countries. The implications of that are obviously that any policies that would move consumers to more healthy and sustainable diets would really be beneficial for those households in high and middle income countries, whereas in low income countries, those really need to be complemented by development-focused policies that would increase spending power or increase agricultural efficiency. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.